showcasing local talent, professionals, and everyday people making Salt Lake City what it is today. It's time for another episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast.
I want to welcome everybody out today to a brand new episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast. This is episode 172. Thank you so much for checking out the show. My name is Chris Hollifield. I am your host. I got a great episode for you today. I took the podcasting gear over to the Road Home, located right here in downtown Salt Lake City at 210 South Rio Grande Street. Took the podcast gear over there, sat down and chatted with Celeste Eggert. She is the development director there at the Road Home. We had a great conversation with her. We chatted about the Road Home, found out what it's all about, found out what they do to help with the homeless, found out about the facilities. Really great conversation. We're going to be playing that here in just a minute. Really quickly, though, I want to talk about Crucial Fest. You know I've chatted about them in the past. Crucial Fest is just a couple weeks away, June 18th through the 20th. Find out more about it at crucialfest.com. That's where you can find out about all of the bands playing the fest. You can buy your tickets, find out about accommodations, the complete schedule lineup right there at crucialfest.com. Like I mentioned, Celeste Eggert from the Road Home is on this episode. Ryan Prince and Travis Tate, they sat down in this conversation and chatted as well. If you remember a couple of weeks ago, we sat down and chatted with Travis Tate and Jacob Lee and talked about the benefit show that's going to be happening June 4th at Wiseguys to actually help benefit the Road Home. So Travis came in and joined us on this episode as well. We had a great conversation. Make sure to check out the website for the Road Home at theroadhome.org. Find out more about them. Find out how you can get involved and help with them here in the Salt Lake City area. Thank you so much, everybody, for checking out this episode of the podcast. Make sure to go to iamsaltlake.com, find out more about the show, as well as check out all the back episodes of the podcast. You can also subscribe in iTunes, Stitcher Radio, however you listen to podcasts. So why don't you guys join me now as we chat with Celeste Eggert at the Road Home in downtown Salt Lake City. So who's with us today? We have Ryan Prince.
Hey, guys.
And we have Travis Tate
Hello.
is joining us again on this episode. We're going to get into a comedy benefit show that has going on June 4th at Wiseguys. If you listen back to a couple episodes, Travis and Jacob joined us. But today we're talking to Celeste at the Road Home in downtown Salt Lake City. How are you doing today, Celeste?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sitting down and taking some time out of your day and sharing a little bit about the Road Home. This is my first time here.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
I've driven by a lot, as I'm sure a lot of people in Salt Lake, you know, we drive by and you see, you know, there's a lot of people outside. And
Yep.
Now, is this where the people actually sleep for the evening and get fed? And
Yeah, we have about 700 people who stay in this facility every night. We have 3 shelters within this location. We have a shelter for single men. We have probably close to 300 single men a night, a shelter for single women, approximately 90 women a night, and a shelter for families. And we currently have about 70 families with probably 150 kids from age newborn to age 18. So, we are the biggest homeless shelter in the entire state of Utah. Our goal is to never turn people away. We want to provide a warm, safe place for everybody in need. But more than that, and I think what a lot of people don't realize about the Road Home is we're not just about shelter. We're really about getting people back on their feet. And so, we have case management. We have outreach services like Department of Workforce Services, the Veterans Administration, all housed on site. And our goal is to get people back into housing and to do it as quickly as possible. So housing is really our primary focus. And I think when people think of the Road Home, they really usually think of shelter. But that's only a small part of what we do.
you mentioned not turning anybody away, though. I mean, I'm sure you've had to.
We have.
I'm sure there's a, capacity limit.
There is.
How often does that happen?
Not too terribly much. One of the things that we do in the wintertime, we see a great increase in our numbers. Weather's colder. It's a lot harder for people to camp out or couch surf with family and friends because they got to be inside all day. So we actually run a second shelter just during the coldest winter months called our community winter shelter. We have a big warehouse housed in Midvale where we put families. We're really excited. We just tore that facility down. It's an old celery warehouse from the 1940s, and we're building a new shelter there. But when we have that shelter open, that allows us additional capacity for single men and single women down here because we can move families out to Midvale. So we can have as many as 1,000 people a night in the wintertime. Sometimes we'll put them in cots in our hallways and lobbies, because it really, it becomes an issue of life or death in many cases in the wintertime, is that if we turn somebody away, they could freeze to death on the street.
So do you bus them down there then, or transport them, or do you just...
A lot of times they show up there. We will transport if needed, but many times they just show up over there directly at that Midvale shelter.
Cool. Well, before we actually get too far into this, I want to, what is your exact role? What is your role here with the Road Home?
I am the director of development. So my role is I oversee the development team, and we, are primarily responsible for raising the money for the agency to keep us open, our lights on and all that good stuff. So it's, we have about a $14 million budget, which sounds huge. But when you consider that we're serving 7,000 people a year, we're open 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. We never, ever shut down. We only have a staff of about 150 employees. It's, that 14 million doesn't sound that much in the scheme of things. But so my job is really supervising the team that brings in the dollars to keep us open.
How did you get involved with the Road Home? Like, what's your little bit of backstory, why we're talking about your involvement here? I kind of want to know a little bit about Celeste. Yeah.
I kind of fell into social work. I had gone to college, graduated, and had a friend who had a connection to a homeless shelter in Detroit. I had never been exposed to homelessness in my life. I don't think I'd ever even volunteered anywhere. And I said, okay. And I moved to Detroit for a year, and I worked in a shelter, and I was blown away by the poverty and the issues, the complex issues that surround homelessness. And I got done with that year, and I just decided I need to do something really lighthearted. And so I was a ski bum up at Alta for a couple seasons and just worked and lived for my pass. But I had this calling the whole time that I just really wanted to get back into working with the homeless, and a case management position became available at the shelter. So, I was actually a case manager. I was on the program side working directly with families. And I did that, for about 5 years, went back to school, got my master's degree in social work. And at that time, I was kind of looking to transition. I love this agency. I love the work that we did, but I wanted to try something different. And they had an opening in the development office to lead our volunteer program. So I did that for a couple of years. And then they had an opening for the development director. And lo and behold, I got it. And it's kind of interesting because most development directors, they went to school for it. And this is, that's their life. It's totally accidental that I fell into this. I've been with the agency 17 years.
So for a while.
Yeah. A long time. Yeah. And I quite honestly, this is never where I thought I would end up. And now it's probably where I don't think I'll ever leave.
Did you grow up here in Utah then, in Salt Lake area? No?
Minnesota originally. Yeah.
Whereabouts in Minnesota? I got tons of family.
Stillwater.
Okay,
and
I'm actually going to Minnesota in July.
No way.
Yeah.
I'm going in August.
Well, that road trip, right?
I know. So I grew up in Stillwater, and now my folks live in Woodbury, if you know where that is.
I don't know Minnesota very well. I haven't been there.
Right outside St. Paul.
Okay. So near the cities, I have family there, and then family out near Fargo.
Oh yeah,
area up that way, farms, and my mom grew up there. And
yeah. So yeah, I was raised there, and then I moved here. My family moved here when I started high school. And so I went to high school here, and then I went away to California for college, and then did Detroit, and then ended up coming back here and have been back here ever since.
So you've been with the Road Home 17 years,
yes.
You said. So 17 years ago versus now, I mean, I'm sure you've seen an increase in homelessness.
Yes.
In Salt Lake City.
Yes.
How has the Road Home as a whole been able to handle that? I mean, just keep expanding. Like you said, you have the winter facilities. I mean, I'm sure it's going to get worse and worse.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I mean,
homelessness.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, it's not going to leave us.
No,
it's there.
It's there, but I think we're providing better opportunities. So yes, over 17 years, I've seen a lot of changes. When I started at the agency, it was, we dealt a lot with single men and single women, not as many families. 2007, the economy tanked, and that's when we started to see this huge surge in families that were coming to us. And so really, families have some different issues and dynamics than singles do, and that kind of changed our focus. About almost 10 years ago, the state decided to create a 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness. And I should back up a little bit and explain what chronic homelessness is. So really, our population that we serve, the homeless population, generally fall into two categories. 90% of the people that we serve are what we call our regular population, for lack of a better term. They are short-term shelter stayers. They typically come in for 30 days or less, and then we never see them again. So for 90% of the homeless population, we're just a stepping stone. Brief episode, they come here, we connect them to some resources, they go on, and they're great, and that's wonderful. But about 10% of our population is what we call chronic. They're kind of our frequent flyers, if you will. They have mental health issues, substance abuse issues, physical health issues. They've been homeless continuously for years or had several episodes of homelessness over time, and they're not really the most desirable housing candidates, and the shelter becomes their permanent housing destination. Not necessarily by choice, but really rather by circumstance. These people are dealing with a lot of issues. So about 10 years ago, we started to, as a community, led by the state, to focus on this chronic cohort and getting them in housing. And we put them in a different kind of housing. A great example of this is Palmer Court. This is a housing facility that the Road Home owns and operates. It's an old Holiday Inn. It's on 999 South Main Street. 5 years ago, we purchased that facility and we turned it into 201 apartments, and it serves formerly chronically homeless single men, single women, and families. And it's got case management on site, a daycare on site, Head Start. We have mental health counseling on site. And people pay 30% of their income towards rent. Almost every person that falls into that chronic cohort has a disabling condition, so they get disability income, and that's usually how we can pay their rent. And people will live there forever. And so what we found, there's really three reasons that we focus on the chronic cohort. One, it's the right thing to do. Shelter is always better than housing. It always is. And I have to say, one of the things when I started here 17 years ago, we used to believe that people had to jump through all these hoops before we'd house them. They have to get clean. They have to get a job. They have to save money. And about the same time that we adopted the 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness, we adopted what's called a housing first philosophy. And basically what that means is get people into housing as quickly as possible and then deal with the issues that led to homelessness in the first place. It's going to be better for them. They're going to work a heck of a lot harder for a home than they are a bed in the shelter. So that chronic cohort, we, through different housing sites like Palmer Court, Sunrise Metro, we've developed these different housing facilities for chronically homeless individuals, and we've really focused our efforts on that 10%. And there's really three reasons why. It's the right thing to do. it's actually more cost effective. If you look at these chronically homeless individuals, and all the community costs they incur every time they eat at a soup kitchen, every time they stay at a shelter, every time they go to an ER, if many of these folks have, substance abuse issues. So every time they get arrested and thrown in jail for public intox, it's far more costly to the community than it is to house them. And the third and final reason that it's so important for us to focus on this 10% is, for every one chronically homeless person we get out of the shelter, that bed that they're using in the course of a year, we can serve up to 11 of the regular population. So it creates greater capacity for us and greater flow. So your question is, how are, as we've seen this increase in homelessness, how are we able to meet the demand? It's because we're being smarter about our service delivery, and we're looking at ways that we can be more effective. And for us, by focusing on that 10%, it's opening up greater flow and output for us. So sorry, that's a really long answer to your question.
I appreciate the depth. I appreciate the depth.
There's a reason you're the director.
Yeah. Like, what makes it so say somebody comes in here, or a family comes in here, individual, whatever. I'm sure they don't all necessarily have the desire to work hard to get into housing. Mm-hmm. I mean, how do you decide who's going to get into housing? Do they actually have to apply for it, or do you look at them and say, okay, they would be a good person for that? How does that work out for you?
We believe, as an agency, that everybody should have housing.
Oh, absolutely. But I'm sure everybody doesn't really, some people just give up on life, I think, don't you?
Some people do. I would say when I was talking about this chronic cohort, it's interesting because what we have found is, in our men's and women's shelter, we have two programs. We have a case managed program and we have an emergency shelter program. Our emergency shelter program is just a daily shelter. They come in, they get a bed, they leave the next day, they come in, they get a bed. And that's where a lot of these chronic people fall into. And oftentimes in the emergency shelter, we offer outreach services, but many times they don't take them, including housing. And so what we've done and changed our strategy as an agency is we actually keep a hot list now, and we're looking at everybody that's staying in our shelter. And if you are becoming a high shelter user, we're going to go after you for housing. Now that can be easier said than done. A lot of these people have really severe mental health issues. I mean, even just to get them to talk to you can be a challenge. Some folks, we have been talking to them for years about getting into housing. And it's really, and in many of these cases, what we find with folks who are experiencing chronic homelessness, there's usually been a trauma. Almost always there's been a severe trauma in their life. Something catastrophic has happened. And so for us, working with that chronic cohort, it's really about developing a relationship. These people who experience chronic homelessness oftentimes are very isolated and they're not very trusting of people. And so we really try to establish that relationship, meet the client where they're at, and then work towards that process of housing. And I got to tell you, it's amazing. I see every day, I have seen people that I thought there is no way we are ever going to get this person into housing. And we do it every day. And I think one of the most exciting things, about our organization is we have in the last couple of years flipped the tide in that we now provide more nights of housing than we do shelter. And I love that because you know what? The solution to homelessness is housing. Yeah. It is housing. A lot of people are talking about moving the shelter right now, and there's all these commissions and everything. And I get it. We certainly understand.
Move the shelter from where it's downtown
from its downtown location. And we understand why people are looking at that. As you mentioned, there's a massive humanity when you come into here, and we get that. But you can't just talk about shelter or relocation of the shelter without talking about the creation of housing. Because you can build the biggest shelter in the world, but if you don't have housing to put people into, you will outgrow that shelter in no time.
It seems like housing, putting people in a permanent housing situation is going to build their self-worth. And it's going to make them have more pride in themselves and make them want to improve their life situation and not be a chronic person.
Exactly.
But it was really interesting to me what you said about sometimes it's easier said than done to get people to want that. My oldest son, he has Asperger's, and that the mental health issue is actually one of the reasons that I started looking at the road home. And because, for him, he's got me and my wife, and he's got a nice situation there. He's a brilliant kid, 19 years old, brilliant, but he's very difficult, and he does things his way, and he wants it his way. And if we weren't around, I don't know what his situation might be. I've got family, but sometimes that rubs a little thin too,
Yeah.
So it just fascinates what you were saying about getting these people into housing, and sometimes they don't want it. But
yeah, and sometimes they have some really challenging issues, such as mental illness,
Right.
such as substance abuse, and that can be really hard. But building those relationships and building the trust is really what's going to get those people into housing and off the street, and that's ultimately our goal. We believe, like I said, every person has a right to housing. Now, it doesn't mean that every person's going to take it. So we're never, in that sense, I don't think we're ever going to solve homelessness in the sense that every single person is going to be housed. But what I do believe is that we can offer everybody a housing opportunity.
Yeah.
And if they choose to take it or not, that's up to them. But everybody should have a choice in whether or not they're housed, and they don't. Now, there's a lot of people who housing is just out of their reach.
Do you have a success story? It's not like, I'm sure with all the years of you being here, is there a story that you've seen somebody just pull themselves out and where they're at today? Because I'm sure you stay in touch with some of these people, or, and is there a story you care to share
Yeah. There's one that comes to mind as we're talking about this chronic cohort of housing. There was one lady in particular, and she, when we switched to this housing first philosophy, and we decided that we were going to focus our efforts on the chronically homeless, she was one of the people that we initially started working with. She was a Native American woman. I'd known her for quite some time. She had a lot of issues. She was very she was a really bad alcoholic. Really bad alcoholic. Actually just drank mouthwash. Didn't even drink alcohol anymore.
Wow.
Just was, if you've ever swallowed mouthwash, I can't imagine. She would down bottles of mouthwash.
I cry when I rinse with mouthwash.
Does that get you drunk?
It can, yeah.
You would have to
it
drink a
has
lot of
alcohol in it.
But is it that much cheaper to drink mouthwash? That's what I don't understand about homelessness.
I'm not really
available
sure.
24 hours a day, maybe.
But
Yeah.
You can probably get it in kits and things too.
Yeah,
If
and
people
that's the thing. We used to give mouthwash out. It was one of the things that we gave out, and
You don't do it no more.
we don't do it because people were drinking the alcohol. But anyway, this particular woman, really bad alcoholic, didn't come into shelter actually very often, but would come in the winter months when it was the coldest. And usually we would have to put her on a cot down the hallway. And that was for a couple of reasons. One, she would be just incredibly intoxicated and very loud and disruptive. Two, not to be graphic, but she had usually defecated and urinated on herself and just smelled really bad. And sometimes our staff, I can remember some of our staff just not throwing her, but putting her in the shower and holding her up fully clothed just so they could get her clean. But she was one of these people that we first started working with. And so we put her into an apartment, and, we thought, wow, we're awesome. We got this lady housed. Woo, way to go. And then after and she had, a team of case managers, and they would check on her every day, and her apartment looked just like the day she moved in. We thought, oh, we're doing such a good job. And after about 2 weeks, we got a really angry phone call from the property manager of the apartment complex we moved her into, because she was sleeping behind the dumpster. She wasn't sleeping in an apartment. She was sleeping behind the dumpster of the apartment complex we moved her into. And I can remember as a staff, we were really upset and why is she sleeping behind this dumpster? We gave her this beautiful apartment, and we went and talked to her, and she really changed our philosophy and how we work with people experiencing chronic homelessness. She was like, I haven't lived inside in 20 years. I don't know
how to do it. Yeah.
So for example, we gave her an electric can opener. She didn't know how to work it. And what we found over the years of working with these people who are experiencing chronic homelessness is just even the most simple things, doing laundry. Sometimes people don't know how to do laundry. When we were leasing up Palmer Court, it was very common that we would have people, leave the door to their apartments open and move their mattresses on the ground because they were used to living in camps, and it was too quiet for them in their apartments, and it was just overwhelming. And so anyway, to make a long story short, we started working with her. We met the client where she was at. A couple years later, she came down to the shelter. I didn't even recognize her. She was clean, dressed nice, still an alcoholic. I don't want to sugarcoat it and say, we get these people into housing and that solves the issues. But for the first time in her life, she was talking to her case manager about the trauma she experienced as a child that later really led to her becoming an alcoholic. It was amazing to see that this person who, before was in such bad shape, and years later, they're maintaining a home and they're not living here. And I just think just your psyche of not living here, if you can get out of here, it's just, as nice as this facility is, it's not a home, and it's depressing, and it's hard. It's hard living here. There's very little privacy. You got all different kinds of personalities that you're dealing with. You have rules that you have to follow. It's not easy.
Life is hard.
Life is hard.
Yeah. What are your thoughts like panhandling? Okay. So, there's these signs, stop panhandling downtown and all of this. And if somebody asks for $1 and you have $1 and you want to believe it's going, is it better to just not give that person $1?
Well, it's interesting because I used to be very anti-panhandling, and I really, and to a degree, I still feel this way. Rather than give to an individual where there's a big question mark, are they going to use it for drugs and alcohol or whatever? Give to an agency, give to a charity, because then they're going to give it to those most in need. But I was talking to one of my coworkers who's worked here a very long time with me, and she said, she changed my perspective. She said, if you have $1 and you want to give that $1, give that $1, but do it without expectation. And that's where I think, the panhandling issue is people feel guilty. They feel like I have to do this. But at the same time, they have expectations. You can't spend it on drugs and alcohol. Well, if they want to spend it on drugs and alcohol, why can't they? I mean, I see both sides. It's not our right to decide what they do with that money. So I used to be
their need at that moment.
And I used to be 100% anti-panhandling. I'm more in the middle now. I can see, I given to panhandlers before? I have. Have I not? Sometimes I don't. A lot of times what I do is, which embarrasses my family and friends, I will talk to them and I'll just say, hey, what do you need? And then I try to point them to the resources that they need. And quite honestly, most of the time when they do that, people will just finally say to me, really, I just want some money to get some alcohol. Okay. If you're being honest about it.
I've got a couple of things on this. I've lived downtown for maybe 5 or 6 years total, and dealt with a lot of homeless people. And I lived, right next to the building here, just a little bit over. And, you see them every day. There's some guys where I could still pick them out. I recognize a few people that are chronically homeless, and you can see where their mental illness probably creeps in. But I'm a pretty generous person. I mean, most people know me are like, yeah, this guy's pretty. And when I meet panhandlers, I take that much approach. I'm way more interested in what they're up
need?
Against. Yeah. And like where it's going to go. And I've had a couple of stories here and there where there was this one guy who, was at the Maverick just north of Broovies. And he came up and he's like, hey, I've got to get to Ogden. I just need, it's 30 miles. I guess I just need like 2 or 3 gallons of gas. My truck's ran out of gas a couple blocks away. Can you help me out? And he just seemed like the most humble, nicest little guy. And like, and I'm on the street. I'm a large human, and I rarely feel like physical threats. If anything, I feel them terrified of me. There's only been a couple times, like walking home late at night in this neighborhood, where I felt like someone was sizing me up to see what they could get from me. But this guy in particular, I'm like, yeah, man, no problem. Come inside. I bought him a little 2.5 gallon thing of gas and filled it up for him and gave it to him. And I was like, do you think that's enough? Let's get you one more. So I gave him 2 of them. And then I was like, where's your truck, dude? Let's, sometimes when you're out of gas, it doesn't start right away, or, let's just make sure it jumps. I can drive you over your car. Mm-hmm. And he's like, no, I'll walk. I've inconvenienced you. You're being like so generous. And I think it costs like, $15, $20, which is a lot more than I'd normally like give somebody. Yeah. And so I was like, no, dude, let me just talk with you, man. I don't have anything to do tonight. This is, I've written like a little TV show that I have in theory about the bridge that it takes to get from the shame and the heaviness of not having a home and not having a plan to incorporating with case management and interacting a plan and looking at what resources are available and what talents you have and getting across that bridge to qualify for, the next phase of your life. But I love all this stuff. And I started walking with the guy. He just starts like a block into it. He just like starts just crying. And I started recording it. And I have that file somewhere, but he just started crying and he stopped and he just admitted he lied. Mm-hmm. He felt just horrible that I'd been generous and helped him. And, ultimately he was going to head to the shelter later, but he just wanted some food and stuff. And I was like, I'll tell you what, man, you get what you ask for. You want some gas. If you would have asked me for money, I probably would have given you $5, or whatever. Yeah. Now you've got some gas, so maybe be resourceful and see if you can do something with it. But I don't know what to tell you.
The gas
I was just like, if anything, just ask for what you want. Yeah. And like, there's so many people that are willing to help and be generous. And I remember on the Pursuit of Happiness, the movie with Will Smith, where they profiled Chris Garner, who's, it's probably the biggest, media outpush of like, what a slide into homelessness and what the way out of it and the belief you have in yourself. And that guy, Chris Garner, on his media tour afterwards, he was saying, I don't give to panhandlers. I give to the road home. I give to shelters because I know that the people that are looking to help themselves will go find the resources that are out there. And there are people like Celeste that are donating, you're working here, but you're putting your life's work towards their progress. So now when I'm encountering that I've had mixed bag too. I gave $10 to a guy. I said, I just need money for beer. I'm a veteran. And I was like, get yourself an LFino. It's delicious.
Yep.
Have a beautiful night. Just make sure it's cold.
Telling you what he needed.
And, or go over to Epic or whatever. I was like, at least get a good beer, cause everybody, sometimes you just need that, not getting a kick in the face again. You just, somebody to like be like, hey man, you're going to be okay. I can see you're still in there, and things are going to work out for you. But I kind of look at that line and it's just neat to size people up. And there's so many different people, even walking down the sidewalk coming in here. My next question to you was going to be, what's a day in the life like for people that are here? There's so many people that are outside. Mm-hmm. We just walked past 150 people outside, all different shapes and sizes. I saw a few strollers. Yep. You see some people that look like they haven't showered in quite a while. You see people that look like they're your everyday Joe who showered this morning and is fine. So
there's people out there that obviously have medical issues too.
Yep. Yeah. All of the above. And it's kind of hard to say because there's really no typical day.
So it's just come and check in and start telling your story and we'll find a spot for you? Or?
If you're in a case managed program, which all families are, and some of our men's and women's population, you can actually be in the shelter all day. The one thing is if you're in a case managed program, you really, you got to be doing something. You have a case manager that you work with, so you got to be looking for work, going to school, doing something. We're not just going to let you come in and sit on your butt for.
You don't have Netflix plan.
No, no. So a lot of the families, they're going to work, they're going to school, they're job searching, they're whatever they're doing. In the men's and women's shelter, we do have an emergency shelter, and there is no case management in that shelter. And, they do have to leave for 2 hours to clean the building from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. But other than that, they can be in there. I think what people fail to recognize is that the Rio Grande corridor is not, it's not just people who are staying in the shelter. There's a lot of stuff going on. Some good, some not good. There's a lot of drug activity out here, and that brings a lot of people to the area. There's dealers, there's users, There's also a lot of people that don't necessarily maybe come and stay in the shelter system. Maybe they camp out, but this is where they come to because we have the soup kitchen across the street, and that's where they can get a meal, or they can go to our emergency services office and get a fresh pair of socks. Some of these folks are actually housed, and this is their social outlet. This is where they come. These are the people that they know, and this is where they hang out. So there's no one reason why people are here. There's a variety of reasons. And I think one of the things that I'm most proud of about our organization is we really work with people on an individual basis. No two case plans are alike. We really try to work with who that person is. It's not a cookie cutter. We do this and then you move out. I mean, it's really, we look at the individual situation and we do it on a case by case basis.
Do you see any companies that are kind of taking up the cause and want to
a lot
come in and help and have roles to play?
So
anybody you want to highlight that's helping you guys out?
Well, our budget is, as I said, about $14 million, and we are on a about 48% of our funding is private and 52 is government. So 48, that would be, corporations, foundations, United Way. And there's a ton of corporations, who support us. Wells Fargo, Key Bank, CIT Bank. I'm naming banks. I don't know why I'm just naming banks. I'm trying to think. The Little America, they support us. There's just a variety of different, corporations that support us. And I think what's interesting that we're finding, at least I'm finding in the fundraising realm, is that a lot of companies are looking not only where to invest their charitable dollars, but they want to invest their time and energy. So we get a lot of companies that want to be able to provide volunteer opportunities for their employees. And so they might come down and do a day of service where they're helping clean the shelter or, reading to the kids. So I think that companies are looking more to become involved with agencies and just throw their money at them. They really want to invest in organizations.
That was going to actually lead me into a question of like if individuals, say somebody, myself, Ryan, Travis,
sure,
we wanted to volunteer.
Yep.
I mean, how do you volunteer? Do you just show up one day? Do you have to sign up, send an email?
So we have a ton of different volunteer opportunities. Last year we had over 13,000 volunteers. So volunteers are huge for us. And in many ways, we utilize volunteers to help, drive down our costs. So for example, at our front desk, we often have volunteers working with staff to help answer phones, answer client questions, collect donations. But if you're interested in volunteering, it's really easy. Go to our website, theroadhome.org. We really have two categories of volunteer opportunities. We have weekly opportunities where you have a set schedule, a set activity that you do every week. And then we also have one-time opportunities. So maybe your church comes in and serves a meal or...
I've done that.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
And so if you're doing a weekly opportunity, we do an orientation process. We offer orientation several times a month. It's on our website. If you're doing a one-time opportunity, you just call and get on our calendar. I will tell you the amazing thing about our community is we have such tremendous volunteer support. For our one-time opportunities, my volunteer coordinators told me we're booked until next October. We don't have a single day open, because that many people want to volunteer and give their time. Wow. And I think that's amazing. And it really, whether people realize it or not, it sends a message to the people that we serve that you are worthy and we care about you and we want to, in our small way or big way, we want to help you. And I don't think people always realize that, coming down and serving a meal may not seem like a big deal to you, but it's a big deal to our families, and it makes them feel like they're a part of something bigger and they can get out of this and they're supported.
And it really was a big deal to everybody that came and did it, to be honest. I mean, that was probably 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And some of those kids are young adults now, and they'll still come talk to me about it, they remember how they felt and how it made them feel great and like they were making a difference in the world. I mean, They do a lot of things, rake and leave, stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's great too, for widows or whatever. But man, they still remember that. And I know all the adults did too. We still talk about it. So do it if you can.
Definitely that good feeling. What about like donation of clothes?
Yeah.
Like say, you instead of giving them to a thrift store or something, bring your clothes down here, jackets,
Absolutely.
shoes, whatever.
Yeah. And actually on our website, again, theroadhome.org,
All the information.
we have a full needs list, but, in-kind donations are huge for us. So we're always looking for things like clothing, new or used, blankets. Think about that. We've got 700 people here a night. Everybody has a blanket. We're not going to fight them when they leave the next day for their blankets. So we always need blankets, new or used. This is a kind of unusual thing. I think people don't often realize this, but white men's tube socks. So look at today. It's raining. A lot of our guys, they are working day labor. They come in, they're soaking wet. Think about a time when you've been soaking wet in the rain. And if you don't have a fresh pair of socks to put on, so, you're at Costco. A lot of our donors tell me this. They're like, oh, I'm at Costco. They have those big packages. I just buy one. I bring it down. I mean, something so simple as socks is huge. Anything baby related. I mean, believe it or not, we have mothers who literally give birth, and this is where they come with their newborn child. Like they were staying in the shelter, they gave birth, and this is unfortunately where they have to come. And they might not have formula, bottles, diapers, wipes, any of those items. So, what's nice about our organization is we accept donations 7 days a week and 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So you can come by every day of the week.
And come by, just come in the doors here on the northeast side. Kinda,
on the south side of our building, we have a large gate with a sign that says donation drop off. Just honk at the gate. Staff will open it, pull back to our loading ramp. You don't even have to get out of your
And
car.
that's 24 hours a day?
Yep.
Wow.
Staff will unload for you and give you a tax receipt.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
So if you're listening, bring some stuff down here. Donate to these guys.
How do you set up your comedy show, Travis? I'm gonna kick that back to you because we talked about it a couple podcasts ago. But you're setting this up. But what was the whole process and thought process behind that again?
Like I said, I've been to the road home. I've done a couple things here, and it just made me feel good doing something here. And I always kind of thought, I kind of want to do something eventually. If I ever get famous or whatever, I want to do some good things, use comedy for good. And then I just started realizing I can do something now. Mm-hmm. And one of my friends, Guy, he's actually one of the comics on the show, Guy Seidel. He made this post, and I think he was downtown somewhere, like at a Maverick or whatever. And he said he was leaving, and there was this homeless guy standing outside, and he was just crying. And he just felt so helpless. Like, what can I do to help this guy? And that post hit me, and I was like, that day, I just messaged him right away. I was like, we need to do a comedy show to raise some money for the road home. And he's like, let's do it. So I just put the ball in motion, went to Keith Stubbs, who owns Wiseguys. He said, yeah, go ahead, whenever you want. So we just got a date, and I started asking comics, and they're all like, hell yeah, I'll do it. It's pretty simple, actually. People are really willing to help out. So
what's that date again?
June 4th, 7:30 p.m., $10. I kind of chose $10 because on your website, $10 gets a person a night stay at the road home.
Yep. $10 moves one person off the street for one night.
Well,
so if we get 300 people there, that's 300 people off the street for one night.
Have you ever had a comedian, or would there ever be a place or time, or I haven't been in the inner workings here, but have you ever had a comedian come in and do a show for people at night?
We have not.
That'd be
I'd do it.
Get on
That'd be
that.
a
We have
Dang.
not. No.
I'll set one up if you want.
Yeah. We would definitely be open
Need
to
some extra
that.
mic time,
Yeah. You can always use extra. I need all the mic time I can get.
Tonight we're going to be down at the road home, right?
Yeah.
Whenever
Whenever
you know
want.
what?
Spread
Let me
some
know.
smiles.
Laughter is humor is
It's
such
so important.
It's so important. And, as I said, I've been here 17 years, and that is not uncommon. Many of our staff have been here longer than that. We have some staff that have been here for 25 years. And people will often ask me, well, why do you work at the road home? Why have you stayed so long? And it's really simple. There's two reasons. One is the clients. I mean, these are the most amazing, remarkable people. And every day I see them overcome these incredible obstacles that, quite frankly, I don't know that I could. And they are just inspiring. But two, it's the staff. We're not getting rich here. And we have fun. And I know that sounds weird, homelessness and fun, but you have to be able to laugh, and you have to have humor, because we're dealing with such difficult issues, and it's important for our clients to be able to laugh and have fun. And they can't always do that because they're so in the throes of homelessness, quite frankly. So.
Excellent. Anything else, Ryan or Travis, that you want to ask before we let Celeste go? Or?
I just admire you quite a bit. I appreciate the work you're doing, and this is a heady task. And I was kind of interested in the initial shock factor of your Detroit experience, because you're probably really young, and that was probably pretty heavy. And the other thing was merely, what's it like here? Do the people that come in, do they self-police any kind of fights that break out, or, things like that? Because I've, living in this neighborhood, I've heard a couple, and not saying about this building, but, it happens.
Well, I'm sure it happens all the time.
And
yeah.
It just seems like, there's probably an expectation here that's very strongly held, but I didn't see any bouncers, so.
Yeah. So we actually, we work really closely with the Salt Lake Police Department. They have a pretty strong presence in the area. We actually, for several hours every day, have a private security firm that we've hired and pay for, to do rounds in this area to keep the police, keep the peace. There is definitely, kind of a social norms among the homeless population. There are certain unsaid rules. If I can say that, like, for example, stealing is the lowest thing that you can do among this population. Like, to steal from another homeless person it's a big no-no. It's a big no-no. And so there is that kind of sense of policing. The other thing that I will tell you too is that, they watch out for each other a lot. And so, and they watch out for the staff a lot. I mean, it's not uncommon as we're checking in men in our men's shelter for a guy to come up and say, "Hey, Travis is coming in and he's in a foul mood, and just a heads up, just so you know." And so when Travis comes in, we're going to probably handle him with kid gloves a little more than we normally would.
This is a totally different Travis, you guys.
Totally different Travis.
Same Travis.
Totally different Travis. But yeah, so there is kind of that policing of themselves, and this is people's temporary home. And so people are very, people who stay here are very concerned. I mean, especially kids. Like, the interesting thing is, out on the streets, if people are smoking or using anywhere near kids, people get really upset, other homeless people.
Really?
And they'll say, "There's kids out here, move it along." And, so
right.
there's definitely,
A sense of community.
exactly. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any, so say you have, the general public, they're using Pioneer Park, they're coming to Twilight Show, whatever. They have encounters. Is there any person here that every homeless person knows that they can reference, that they're going to, if there's ever a situation, you're like, "Hey, I'm going to go talk to Celeste over there, and she's going to help you out," or whatever, instead of giving you $5 now or whatever. Is there?
You mean among homeless people or among staff?
Among homeless people, is there?
You want a name drop, or you want a tattletale? I'm lost.
Both, yeah, no, it's just sort of like, how do you correlate that, hey, we're part of the solution for you,
Right.
and not just an individual person for you to target? This is probably no answer.
You want to
this
gain
question,
their trust.
but yeah.
Right.
In those certain ways, I think that, there's so many people that are volunteering. There's so many people that are a part of this. Is there, there may not be an answer to this question. I just feel like saying, "Hey, I support the road home. I hope you're doing good." May be the answer, but
Right.
just to give people tools to encounter panhandlers, just because it's an awkward environment a lot of times.
It is. And we get asked a lot. People will say, what should I do with panhandling? And I feel really guilty. And I get it. It's hard to see a human being who may or may not be suffering walk by and do nothing. But
sometimes even a smile is better than nothing,
Sometimes
like
it
I've heard
is.
they're like, "Hey, just acknowledge me," and that's like
A high five.
more than what 10 out of 20 people do. Like,
it's interesting because a while ago I was on X96, and you're going on X96.
Yeah, with you.
Yes. With the morning show, who adore.
Which is where I actually heard about the road home for the first time.
I adore them.
Was listening
They're
to radio from
amazing human beings. But Bill Allred was doing, there's a homeless person that was sleeping in front of their studios, and he was taking that homeless person's picture every night, and then he was posting it, and he wasn't commenting about it or anything. He was just posting the picture. And so they asked me to come on to talk about, is that right or wrong? And, so the interesting thing is, and I don't necessarily advise this for everybody, but so before the interview, I went to the convenience store and, grabbed a pack of cigarettes and, an extra cup of coffee. And I just went up to the homeless gentleman. He was packing up for the day, getting his stuff moved. And I was like, "Hey, do you want a cup of coffee?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'd love one." And then, we just started talking, and then I had a cigarette, and he was like, "Oh, can I have a cigarette?" I was like, "Sure. Okay." And I found out all about this person, and it was really interesting. So when I went and talked to Bill, I could tell him, I was like, this is a guy, I can't remember exactly what his name was, but this is his story. He was from California. He had family. He was an alcoholic. He'd come to Utah because of the job market. So the point of this story is that these are human beings. And I think sometimes, because they're panhandling or because they're sleeping on a sidewalk, we somehow in our minds devalue them a bit. And I think realizing that this is a human being, and they may or may not be in need, it makes it a lot harder to walk past a panhandler. And personally, sometimes I want to take that risk, even if I, I'm wrong. But what if I'm right? And what if that person really did need that dollar?
And I don't think any of us have many strangers are like taking interest in us and they're like, "Hey, you're cool. Like, how can I support you?" And when people do, that's something you remember, you go to bed that night and being like, "Yeah, it was better than yesterday," like,
right.
There's something more to it. So it
puts a human face on the problem.
Right.
Because sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind.
And it normalizes their shame. And the things that people like beat themselves up about sometimes can relax a little bit. You're like, "Hey, I felt normal. I felt a little bit."
If you walk past 9 panhandlers and don't think anything of it, but that 10th one you come across and for some reason there's some human connection there and it touches your heart, do something about it,
And again, I'm not advocating to support panhandlers or advocating not to.
Right.
But I think
listen to your heart. Listen to your heart in a situation. Because sometimes they can get a little aggressive. I will be the first to admit that too. And they start to tick me off and I'm just like, come on, relax.
Absolutely. But I think it's true giving is, it's not because you're going to get something out of it.
Yeah.
A lot of times people will come down here, especially during the holidays, and they'll come into the shelter and they'll say, I have a donation and I want to pass it out to the homeless clients. And I tell them that due to our privacy and confidentiality, we don't allow people to do that. And they will, in many cases, I've had people up in my face screaming at me, "Well, fine, I'm not going to donate to you anymore." And then they go out in the street and pass the items out. And that is their choice. But truly, if you're giving,
don't put terms on it.
Don't put terms on it, and that's what it goes with panhandling. You can't say, "I'm only going to give to panhandlers if I know it's not going to go to drugs and alcohol."
Right.
I mean, true giving is really, I'm going to give and I'm going to take a gamble and I'm going to hope that they're going to do something worthwhile with it. But it is a.
Who are we to judge what their need is at that moment?
Yeah.
Honestly.
But again, both sides of the argument. Right. I get it. I see it.
Well, thank you so much, Celeste, for
I admire you too.
Sitting down.
Well, I admire you, Travis, for stepping up and doing this. And I just have to say, I'm sorry to interject.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
One of the nice things about my job is I get to meet a lot of interesting and fun people like you all, and people will often say, "Oh, it's so great that you work at the road home," and it is. I so appreciate when people say that to me. But in my mind, the true heroes are people like Travis, who, I mean, I get paid. This is my job. I don't get paid very much, but people like you, Travis, who say, "I see a need and I'm going to do something," and that is inspiring to me. And I just think you are amazing for doing that. And so The feeling is mutual, great admiration. And for everybody who does that, for every person who gives in some way, they open up their checkbook, they do a comedy show, they come down and read to the kids, they donate their old clothing. That is truly overwhelming and remarkable to me when I think about it.
How can people get in touch? Website? theroadhome.org. It has all the information on our programs.
There's a really cool video on there too.
There's a great video on there. We always have information about our upcoming events. If you're on social media, like The Road Home on Facebook, we also have an Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn. But yeah, I mean,
what's the address down here too?
The address is 210 South Rio Grande Street, which is actually 455 West.
Okay. In downtown Salt Lake City.
And the doors we walked in were right on the north end of Rio Grande, just off of 2nd South on the east side of the building.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can I say thanks to Alicia Gleed also for she's been
wonderful.
helping me a lot with this whole thing. She's been putting up with
she's my marketing specialist.
My ridiculous emails.
And if you're driving your car listening right now, or you don't have something to write down, just go to iamsaltlake.com and I'll put all the links for The Road Home, the Facebook, the website, all that right there on the website. Thank you, Ryan Prince. Thank you, Travis Tate. Thank you, Celeste. Thank you, The Road Home.
Thank you.
For allowing us to sit down and talk. You're welcome. Absolutely.
All right, keep up the good work.
Thank you.
All right. Many thanks goes out to Celeste Eggert in The Road Home for joining us on this episode of the podcast. Again, you can go to their website at theroadhome.org, find out more about them, find out how you can donate, find out how you can volunteer. Also, many thanks goes out to Ryan Prince and Travis Tate for co-hosting on this episode of the podcast. I'd love to know your thoughts and feedback. Send an email at iamsaltlake@gmail.com. That goes directly to myself. I'd love to know what you thought about this episode, and maybe if you'd even like to come on a future episode of the podcast and share your story with the rest of Salt Lake City. Hey, there's a few ways you can help out with the podcast. You can tell your family and friends about the show. Share any of your favorite episodes on any social media sites. Gets the word out and helps the show grow. Also, you can rate and review the podcast in iTunes or Stitcher Radio. Helps boost the ratings. And I also love to hear what you have to say about the podcast. We got a recent iTunes review. I just want to read that really quickly. It's from Kat Palmer Photo. She writes, I love Salt Lake, and it has been fun to learn more and be exposed to people I may not have been. Good job, Chris. You know, it's just fun to hear what you guys have to say about the podcast. Also, you can donate to the podcast. It helps keep the show alive. It helps with the web hosting, helps with the audio hosting. You can donate at iamsaltlake.com/donate. Hit the donate button. It'll send you to PayPal, and you can donate and help keep the show moving forward. I want to thank those of you that have donated $1 or $2. It helps out immensely. If you guys haven't used Uber, I got a $20 promo code for the I Am Salt Lake podcast listeners. If you enter in the promo code Uber Utah 801, that'll give you a free $20 ride for first-time users. And it's a great way to get around Salt Lake City if you're out for the evening, if you want to hit the bar up, if you want to go to a concert at Red Butte or a concert at USANA. Make sure to use Uber. That way you guys don't have to pay for parking or deal with the hassles. If you've had a few drinks, use Uber. It's all throughout Salt Lake City, all throughout the valley. Again, $20 off your first ride. Use the code Uber Utah 801. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. I'm here every week with a brand new episode showcasing people in Salt Lake City that are making the city a better place to live, making it a place that I know I can be proud to call home. You guys have a great week, and until then, my name is Chris Hollifield, and we'll chat again real soon.